I'm excited about this week's episode. I think it's going to be really fun because it's something that we have struggled with and also something I feel like we've gotten pretty good at.
Sure, we've had some victories in this area for sure.
Yeah, so we've had some victories, and this is also, I feel like, such a hot conversation when it comes to marriage. At least I get asked a lot online or get concerns a lot online, like, I don't feel like my husband is really helping out all that much, or maybe it's a working outside the home mom. And she's like, I feel like we're both working and then I come home and I still have to do dinner and make the dish, do all the things. Yeah, do and make dinner and dishes, and things like that. And so I don't know. I think this is going to be a good conversation. And we also got a comment the other day.
Yeah,
that kind of spawned this conversation.
Yeah, if you follow Katie on Instagram, then you saw, I think on Friday night, a few nights ago, when we were on a date, actually. That was fun.
That was.
Katie did like a Q&A for next week's podcast, actually. So some of you that asked questions, we're going to be answering them next week. And there are some juicy answers that we're going to have, some good questions. So you will not want to miss next week's episode.
I raised my mic just for the eyebrows.
However, one of the questions was so good that it sparked a conversation that Katie and I decided to do a whole podcast on. And someone asked, you know who you are if you're listening. It looks like it's a female. She said, Katie, how do you handle your husband taking the lead and progressing his career, but not you? And I'm guessing that this is kind of in response to last week's episode and how we were talking about roles, and just a theme that we've had for the last couple of weeks that you've shared on Instagram and on YouTube. And because if you listen to last week's episode, Katie and I had felt like our roles had kind of gotten out of whack and we were walking in each other's roles. And when we felt convicted in this area, we switched back kind of to me being more in the leadership role and you being more of that helpmeet. And that's what we felt really like the Lord had laid on our heart to be like, hey, you guys aren't doing this properly. Here are some practical things you can do to walk more in that. And so I think that's what this question was derived from.
Yeah, and when we say leadership and helpmeet, for Elisha, helpmeet meant doing a lot more of the housework, taking care of schooling the kids, cooking, stuff like that. More traditional housewife things. And for him, as far as the leadership in our marriage specifically, that was taking over that lead role in the management of our businesses. Mm-hmm. So this wasn't like overall, I mean, like there's spiritual leadership and there's leadership within our marriage and all this, right. But those are specifically the shifts that we made. And I thought that this was an interesting question because even when Elisha and I have had our differences or when we felt like our roles were off, I've never felt like Elisha was building his career.
Or you were building yours.
Or I was building my career. And that's never just a perspective that I've had. It's always been like, for instance, in this case, Elisha taking over the leadership role in our businesses, me stepping out of that role. I don't view it as him building his career. I view it as him building our future. And that's how I think we've always viewed what we are doing in our marriage.
Yeah, I think that's why Katie and I were perplexed a little bit by this question, is because it made us realize that we just don't view things this way in regards to me pursuing my career, and then maybe later you can pursue your career or vice versa. It's thinking like, whoa, we just are always pursuing a like-minded vision, and our roles and our responsibilities within pursuing that vision vary. And we want to make sure that we're walking out our God-given roles within that same pursuit, that same vision.
That said, the more we thought about this, the more we were like, this is probably a very common perspective. We've been blessed to be surrounded by a lot of marriages and families that have that same vision and those same aligned dreams. And that's not to say everything's, perfect all the time, but there is this common, it's like assumed that we are working towards something because we're married. Our marriage and our family is working towards something together. And it's not me pursuing my thing, Elisha pursuing his thing, which is a lot more common than not in the 21st century. I think it's more like what do I have going on, and what does he have going on?
Yeah, and I think Katie already said it, but we feel fortunate to have had this exemplified for pretty much our whole life, not just in our parents, but in our grandparents and in aunts and uncles and close friends. And so Katie and I kind of went into marriage, even if we didn't explicitly specify what our marriage vision was or our vision for marriage and for family and life was. We knew that we wanted to come to, we knew it that by entering into holy matrimony, we were going to be setting off on this vision that we wanted to come to agreement on, and we wanted to find it together.
Yes. And we want to dive more into like dreams, goals, and visions and like practical things, because we kind of backtracked and we're like, okay, why do we have this already kind of built into our marriage? How could someone who doesn't feel like this is the case for them start to have that perspective of alignment and oneness in this area? But I want to touch real quick on a piece of marriage advice that I read by this couple that I really admire, just because they're like 100 years old. I don't know. They're so old.
Wow. Are they living or
yeah.
They are alive?
They aren't really 100, but they're really old. And they have this really flirtatious marriage, which I think says a lot. If you're still flirting when you're ancient, there's probably other things that are in line there. And if you're still speaking really well of your spouse.
Yeah, you're not going to say their names after all of this, are you?
No, I'm not.
Oh, good. After you say somebody's ancient and 150 years old 100 times, then it seems kind of inappropriate to say their names.
Well, I mean that as a good thing.
Yeah.
As far as they know what they're talking about.
Yes.
And something that they said is do as many things as you can together in your marriage, because every shared experience, every shared
memory,
vision, memory, decision, it forms a thread between you and your partner. And the more threads that you have formed between each other, the harder it is for that relationship to be ripped apart, right? And I just think that's so cool. I want to have so many threads tied to Elisha. And I think this is a big reason. There's so many reasons, but I think not following God's design for marriage is a big reason why so many marriages are failing. But in our culture, we're really set up to tie our threads to other people. Like, I have my girlfriends. He has his girlfriends.
Yeah, or your colleagues and your business partners.
Yes. Yeah. Did I say your girlfriends? I think I meant your guy friends.
Like your girlfriends, like your gal friends. Yeah.
Yes. I have, I have my church group. He has his church group.
Yeah.
I have my workout classes. He has his, and whatever. My hobbies, my career, my. We kind of share the kids, but we send them off to do their thing too.
Right.
So I think this is actually really applicable to family culture too. As many shared experiences you have as a family, that creates a very strong family culture. And very rarely do we have those threads. So anyways, going back to the marriage thing though.
Yes.
We don't want our threads tied out here to all these things. We want them tied to each other.
That's right. Yeah, because, looking at this, again, kind of going back to this question, Katie, do you feel, I want to paraphrase, but, since Elisha is now advancing his career, do you kind of feel like you are missing out by not being able to pursue yours? And we've always looked at jobs or careers or businesses, finances as a means. It's just a part of the puzzle to the bigger vision. Never were any of those things an end in it of themselves. And that's just kind of like the hierarchy of how we think. And we've mentioned our giant five before. I'll say it again, but our faith, our relationship with God is just first and foremost. How is our faith? Is it growing? Is it being diminished? Is it being attacked? Are the things we're putting into our head and our heart and our activities honoring to God? Are they strengthening our faith and our relationship with God? That would be number one. And then our marriage is a number two. And then number three is our children, and then our physical health. And then under there, the fifth thing in our giant five would be things like that you would say like career or jobs or, ministry opportunities and outside of the home impact opportunities, impacting people's lives outside of your home. And Katie and I are very imperfect at keeping that priority list all the time, but that's that's truly where our heart's desire and our goals for life lie. And those get out of whack, they get out of balance. Sometimes we let our health slip away. We don't we let our marriage get, kind of boring sometimes if we're not careful, or we get, we get into ruts in all those areas. But the reason it's easy for, I think, me to let Katie do certain things that I might see as her advancing her platform or her career, and then why it's really easy for us to flip that and say, wait a second, this isn't healthy for our family. Elisha should be taking the lead in some more of these business things, is because those are very down the priority list, and they're either going to be supporting our ultimate mission or taking away from them. And so it's a lot easier to have an unemotional view on topics like career and job. And I'm being kind of long-winded in my explanation here, but I do want to clarify.
No, take your time.
It might be easy to look at our life and to say, well, that's, maybe it's easy for Katie and I to have this perspective because we're entrepreneurial and we run businesses from home and we're kind of running them as a family. But Katie and I have seen this played out in far more conventional career homes as well, where even if the father had a more, would you say, like, formal career, whereas a medical doctor or an engineer or a lawyer, they still, that wasn't the priority. The family vision, the home, the marriage, their faith, their relationship with the Lord was the priority. And even though that was a more, I guess, all-involving career that typically is a bigger part of people's identity, that wasn't the case for these families that we were around. Wouldn't you say?
Yes. I think that every time, I think Elisha and I have so many threads when it comes to a shared vision and shared dreams and shared goals. Obviously, we all, all two of us, have our own little goals and dreams, and I know things that Elisha really loves that I'm not that into. But that said, because Elisha loves certain things, like, say, music, then I want that to be a part of our bigger vision. So I want to support him in that. That would be an example of something that maybe I don't have any, I'm not helping him as far as, like, I don't play anything. I don't, do any of them. That could technically just be his thing, but we really want that to be a part of our family's bigger vision. And we want that to become, be a thread that we can both share in together. And I think what's so cool about having a shared vision is that there's a compounding effect that happens in marriage. Potentially, this does not happen in every marriage, and I really want to be able to take advantage of it in our marriage. And my dad always used to say, in marriage, 1 + 1 is not 2. And that's so true, because when you're combining your resources, your skills, your abilities, your talents, your strengths, that whole opposites attract thing. Maybe you're strong in a place where your spouse is weak. You combine your shared financial goals. So you aren't spending money on something, I'm not spending money on these things. Elisha's spending money on these things. There can just be this compounding effect where you can have such a bigger dream and such a bigger vision when you're both, like two horses plowing the same wagon, instead of like, oh, I got my wagon over here, you got your wagon over here. We're kind of just like zigzagging here.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's not, I think this defies mathematics. It defies science when two become one. As the Bible tells us, that's what happens in marriage. And it's so much more than 1 + 1 being 2. Even in practical ways, you can say, maybe like from a spiritual standpoint, you are becoming this one flesh, and there are a ton of spiritual implications. But in a practical way, it's like you get so much more done when you are one in mind and you're one in heart and in vision than you do if you are divided.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, some examples of vision, like our vision for our children. I wrote down some things. We want them to love God, to remain innocent for, a while, a lot earlier than kids do these days. Bless others in public, bless our own home, bring us rest and joy, be capable lifelong learners, be prepared adults and feel like we prepared them for the real world, not get out there and be like, what on earth? Like, my parents didn't tell me anything I needed to know. And above all, know and love the Lord. That's like a general rough draft of part of our vision for our kids. And so when I am homeschooling them, I am pushing ahead that vision. When Elisha takes them and trains them or does Bible time with them in the evening, he's pushing forward that vision. And so it becomes a lot less like, what's he doing? What am I doing? I'm taking care of the kids more. He's taking care of the kids more. It's just whoever has the capability and the bandwidth to push that vision forward, that part of our vision forward. We want one of us to jump in and do it.
100%. And it feels so rewarding and empowering when your spouse, when you're on the same page in an area like child training or just parenting in general with your children, because that's just a huge heart's desire of both Katie and I. And I could see how if that's not one of these united heart's desires, if your hearts aren't united in that desire for your children, that could be a very frustrating situation.
Yes.
And so rather than trying to keep track of score or to try to convince your spouse to put in more hours or to take more time and, with the kiddos and do more sessions of training, I feel like the goal should be coming to a like-minded vision first and foremost. And sure, the practical things have to happen every day too, but going kind of back, I don't talk about the heart that often, but like going back to your spouse's heart and being like, praying for them, praying that for your own heart, that it would be really molded to what God has for you in your marriage, so that you can sit down and in a conversation with your spouse realize, wait a second, we do have the same goal, we do have the same vision, and you're able to then attack the next day with that in mind. I wrote down, if you lose sight of the master plan, then you have no choice but to micromanage the practical things, the tactics of the day. You have no choice but to just keep track of what the other person's doing with their minute and with their hour and with their day. But if you have a clear vision of that master plan and you're moving towards it, then that's where your vision's at. And then the practical things fall into place. It doesn't mean there needs to be some management, but not micromanagement of keeping score of what the other spouse is doing.
Yeah, I think that even in terms of finances, right? One day, Elisha and I have the shared goal of having a property, of having it be, not too close to town, but close enough to town. And now when I picture the vision for our home, it's clean, a place of rest, fun, inspirational. So if Elisha is working on that long-term vision of, investing his time and energy into increasing our finances so that we can one day have that shared dream, and in the here and now, I'm best set to the task of making sure that our home is this place of rest where he's able to come and be encouraged and be blessed and be fed and then go back out and be more effective in creating that long-term, financial future for us, then that's great. We're doing different tactics.
That's not a compromise.
It's not a compromise. I don't feel like, well, he's going out and he gets to, I wish I could go talk to so-and-so or, eat lunch out or whatever. Those thoughts aren't crossing my brain because I'm just thinking, that's awesome. He's doing that. I'm doing this. We're on a team. You picture any team like soccer. If you're in defense and your team wins, that's awesome. It's a win. It doesn't matter that you didn't score a single goal.
Right.
I think of the same thing with our health. Elisha and I, especially after this fourth baby, have just been we really want to be in a healthy place because this last year was pretty unhealthy for us. And so when Elisha watches the kids for me to be able to go work out, that's a blessing to me and to the whole family. Yeah. Or that's how he makes me feel, at least.
Well, that is the reality of how I feel.
Yeah, because I'll have people ask, how do you have time to go work out? My husband doesn't want to watch the kids. And I'm like, well, it's a different perspective. In our perspective, Elisha and I are both winning when I work out. We're both winning when we're paying for his weights, so he could work out here.
Exercise equipment.
Yeah, his exercise equipment. That's a win for both of us.
Mm-hmm. We're both winning when we buy nicer, healthier food, spend more money on healthy food.
When I cook with healthy ingredients that taste good so we aren't as tempted to eat out, I'm thinking, wow, I'm really moving forward our vision of being healthy as a family. I'm not oh man, it's a different perspective. I'm not I have to cook from home and eat from home and, this is such a burden to carry, which I have felt at different times. When I don't have that big picture vision, like Elisha said, the day in and day out really starts mattering.
Yeah. You use the example of a sports team, and I think that can be a really great analogy. I mentioned earlier the analogy of starting a business with someone, with a business partner. And of course, this analogy is going to fall short of an actual, good comparison of marriage, because how can you find an analogy for marriage apart from Christ and the church? That's a pretty good analogy right there. No, we're the analogy. We're the allegory. That's the real marriage, is Christ and his church. But if you take a business partnership and you're 50-50 partners and you start a business with one another, you've got, hopefully you have like a mission statement, you've got a goal, you've got there's a reason that should probably be pretty well defined as to why you're starting this business together. And maybe when you started your marriage, you didn't have that clearly laid out, what your vision was for your marriage and what the goal was, but you can do that now. You can do that time and time again in your marriage. And I think businesses do that all the time. But going back to, if you are equal part owners of a business, you both have this like-minded, this shared vision, and a vested interest to see that those missions the mission gets accomplished, and that you're moving things forward. And I think good partners in that situation, again, we're not advocating a 50-50 perspective on marriage.
No,
but
it's 100%.
It's 100% and 100%. But in a business partnership, you really don't get too worried about who I'm doing more accounting, or he's doing more marketing, or why is he running the sales and I'm doing this. You're looking at the big picture and saying, okay, where are year to date? Are we growing? And you're looking at this big picture, this 10,000 foot view of your business. And I think that in marriage, yes, practical things add up and they matter, but it's so much easier to have a conversation that's civil and not emotionally charged when you're both looking at it from the 10,000 foot view of, we both know, and you're like-minded on what that long-term goal is. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, sorry, I'm cutting you off.
Cut me off. No. Did I cut you off?
No, you didn't.
Okay, so you cut me off one time, so I get to cut you off one more time before this podcast is over. I want to make sure we keep accurate count here.
Keep score here. Well, I was just thinking along those lines. Elisha and I have always had that shared vision, and we've definitely got hung up on the tactics sometimes.
Oh, big time. Yes, like we've not walked in anything close to perfection in this.
No. So I love how you brought that up, though, because we have a starting place. We're able to go back, look at the big picture, step back and be like, you know what? This often isn't getting us to the big picture. Often when we have issue with our tactics or what I'm doing, what he's doing, it's because it's not getting us to the long-term vision that we have. Mm-hmm. Our long-term vision has been, for me, we've talked about this, to homeschool our kids. So we had to take a step back, even though our youngest our oldest right now is only 4. We have to say, okay, if Katie keeps leading out in the business for the next 5 or 6 or 7 years, then what? It's a lot bigger. Yeah. And then I'm just going to quit cold turkey then? Mm-hmm. Or is Elisha going to homeschool our kids? Like, that didn't fit into our bigger picture. So we needed to make adjustments today.
Yes.
Based on that vision.
Right. That's right. And I think you can have like different levels. I know we do for sure have different levels of the vision. You can have like your dream property vision, your financial vision, your fitness vision, your marriage vision. But something that Katie and I both agree on is like this hierarchy of value system that I referenced earlier, where if something's going to tear apart our marriage, it's just not worth it.
Yes.
Marriage is so high on our priority list where if like that is the reward in it of itself, or that is enough of a goal in it of itself to have a healthy, thriving marriage till the day that we die. So we're not going to let something break our marriage down. And it goes on with our children. Man, this is tearing our family apart. And of course, our faith. Man, this is compromising my conscience. This is driving a wedge in my faith. Well, then get rid of it. And so Katie and I are very like-minded on those things. Not every marriage is, unfortunately. That should be a goal, is to come to a like-minded perspective on your faith, on your marriage. Do you value marriage? Do you value being together, staying married, sticking it out, seeing it through? Do you think that just that in and of itself is something that's honoring to God and worthy of your energy and your effort and your decision making?
I love how you said that. And even as you were saying that, because of that hierarchy, that is like our children too. Like, we aren't going to let our children come in between our marriage, even though it's a very valuable relationship, obviously. And unfortunately, that happens in a lot of marriages. So something that we practically do is, I want to say this first. I think it's really important that for almost anything, you don't focus on what you're saying no to, you focus on what you're saying yes to.
Yeah.
That really helps me in the moment. It's like, I'm not saying no to a career. I'm not saying no to a girls' night. I'm not saying no. You know,
Right.
Elisha's not saying no to
guys' night
or
or
spending money on something.
right, playing golf, getting a golf membership,
Yeah.
you know, at the local club.
I'm saying yes to my dream life. I'm saying yes to my dream marriage. I'm saying yes to my dream family, because this is the dream that we're both working towards. And we determined that this is the best way to get to our dream. So every time I make a meal at home, every time I stay home and Elisha leaves our home, that is not at all something that bums me out, because I'm excited that we're both working towards the same thing.
Yeah.
And I can love the day in and day out because of that vision.
That's right. And if you feel that your spouse is acting in a way or starting a habit or a hobby that's not supporting your long-term goals, then you can approach them in a respectful and in this commonality, this common ground of, hey, we both know we've got the same vision. From my perspective, I see this thing that you're adopting into your life as not really supporting that. How do you see it supporting our long-term vision? And I feel like that can be a really healthy conversation.
Yeah, totally. I
Maybe
like that.
Maybe it's not always a healthy conversation, but I feel like that's a good framework for it potentially being
It's a good starting place.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to have those checks all the time. If I
Yes.
start to pursue something that just I individually like to pursue, or Elisha starts to pursue something, and we have to be like, okay, is there a way that I can get involved, or that one of our kids could get involved one day? Or like, how is this a win outside of just you?
Yep.
And what's funny, or me, and that's something that the world doesn't want us to look at all. It's just like, if you're happy, you do it. And the ironic thing is that we're happiest when we're in relationship.
Yeah.
And with God and with each other, that's when we're happiest. It's not when we're just out pursuing our own thing. Like, I don't want this to come across like I'm living a life of sacrifice, or that we're living a life of sacrifice, because I genuinely am one of the happiest people I know. And I love waking up in the morning and getting to live my life. So this isn't, you know, just me, or Elisha, I hope, you know, just slogging through this thing, because we don't, the joy's in the journey. And that's something that Elisha and I really believe wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And if your affections aren't towards that, you can change your affection. That's what's so cool about our minds and our hearts. I think back to the things that I was so passionate about 10 years ago, and that I thought for sure I would want to be maybe in this like subculture and be a part of this, you know, group and be pursuing a certain field. And I look back 10 years later and I'm thinking, boy, my heart's not even close. Like, no part of me regrets not being a part of that. In fact, I'm so grateful that I'm not a part of that, but that instead the Lord took my affection elsewhere. And I think that you can pray for the Lord to change your heart on things, because maybe you're listening to this and you're like, I straight up am not excited about marriage. I'm straight up not excited about raising my children. My spouse and I have, you know, like the only thing we have in common is that we both, you know, want to go on vacation to Maui. And it's like, okay, we'll start there. You've got that in common. Like, start there and start working from there. But we have so much control over what we end up getting excited about. And it's where we put our focus. And it's also being yielded to God's working in our life and His Holy Spirit changing our hearts and changing our affection. Because yes, we want to be obedient to God's word regardless of how we feel. But it's way more fun when you're excited about God's will too. And when that gets you excited. And so, you know, again, I think it's God's will that marriages stay together and that they thrive. And so pray for that to be your heart's desire, to say, boy, I want marriage, just the idea of marriage maybe, to get me excited. And then I want to get excited about my spouse. I want to be excited about my spouse and pursuing that deep relationship. Same with children. I think it's God's desire that parents raise up their children in the ways that they should go, and they should teach them of God's ways and preach the gospel in the home. If that doesn't excite you, or you don't get, you know, excited to stay up late studying God's word so that you can teach your children, or reading child training books, well, pray that it would do that, and then start doing it out of habit. Like, that's the other thing too, is that what you feed and what you water, whatever grass you water, that's what grows, right?
Yes.
And we've both seen that so clearly. When I'm spending my free time watching ESPN, or, you know, just watching jiu-jitsu videos, that's where my heart and my mind are at. And then I go to God's word and I see what he has to say about children and about marriage, and my affection is turned towards that.
Yeah, and Elisha and I are really speaking to ourselves in this, because this is something we have to consistently remind ourselves of. And I think of that verse, I don't have the reference because I'm just now thinking about it as you're saying this, but it's a very popular verse about the Lord giving you the desires of your heart. And I used to always think, oh, well, then I'll just get what I want. So this works out really well. But I think what's cool, I heard it explained one time, is no, God changes your heart so that you desire what he desires. And he gives you those desires. And I think that's just a wonderful thing to pray for. And I feel like even within the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I've been so grateful. I told Elisha this on the way home from church. I feel like the Lord has, I feel kind of like a different person, and that I have these new desires I have never had in my life, in regards to just being a mom, just being a mom in air quotes. But that's never been so exciting to me. And, or even the way that I want to seek the Lord, or the way that I view my sin. All these things have just really changed in my life and in my heart. And it's so cool how we can change all the time. The Lord created that.
Yep.
And it's beautiful.
That's right. And there's a practical result to our practical behavior. If you just consistently go to God's word, then he is faithful to really speak to you through his word. And if you consistently avoid God's word or fill your mind with things of this world, then your faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. And, God doesn't change. His truth doesn't change. The truth and the power of the gospel doesn't change. The variable is us, and our faith. And we've got the ability to grow our faith, or to neglect our faith and to not pour into it.
Something that Elisha and I practically used to do, and we've continued doing this even with our little role switch we've talked with you guys about, is we have our big picture vision. We had our big picture vision. Why is that so hard to say? With the businesses. And so each week we would sit down on Sunday night and we would plan out everything that needed to be done in the businesses, and then divvy up responsibility to make sure everything got done, because there's a really strong cause and effect right away in business, which in family and in relationship, it can be a lot more vague. But we still have sat down the past few weeks and established our weekly goals as a family, just the little bite-sized pieces we're taking towards our overall vision and goals. And we clearly define those responsibilities and expectations. I think especially when you're new to this, especially when you're stepping into maybe a new role, or there's a change happening, maybe a move happens, a job change happens, it's important to not assume anything as far as just writing, just picturing you're a team. Some things that I put down on our goal sheet now are haircuts, or doing the kids' school, letting Elisha know I have a facial. I want to take the kids to gymnastics. I'm filling him in on my life, and he put some things on there that are filling him in on his life. And we still feel like we're a team going towards this shared vision. And the other thing is we've talked about these, they're dots. We write these dots out on notebook paper and tape it on the fridge, and then we color in the dots as we go throughout the week. And if there's something like, say, an oil change, and that was something Elisha wanted to get done this week, well, we're a team. So if he's really busy or overwhelmed, I can go knock out that dot. And I'm not thinking, oh man, I did the dishes and there's this dot here of the oil change. It's oh, cool. The goal is just to get all the dots.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who does the dots.
Right.
And I think of that a lot with Elisha, actually, the way you bathe our kids. I think I've given our kids one bath in their lives. Elisha bathes our kids all the time. But he doesn't think, oh, that's, Katie takes care of the kids for the most part, or he gets the kids dressed for church. He does these things because it's a win for you. I'm going to put words in your mouth here. Yeah. When we all show up to church looking presentable, I take longer to get all put together. So he takes the kids so that we could have that shared vision of leaving the house as a put together family, which is kind of hard to do when you have 4 little kids.
Yeah.
And that really blesses me. But I think in a lot of homes, that would probably be more of a mom's role to get the kids dressed. And I don't feel any of that from you.
Yes. Yeah, no, you're so right. I just love like when you break it down to those practical things like bathing the children or getting them dressed or doing the dishes, you can have you can know the why, and you're not getting hung up on what, I could be off doing something, whatever. I could be at the gym right now working out. Instead, I'm here with the kids. We just don't view things that way in general. Of course, we're selfish. We've got selfish abilities.
Yeah, it happens.
We're human beings that will get selfish, and we'd rather be doing something than the dishes in that moment. And you can, cop an attitude. But in general, Katie and I think, are consistently able to fall back on this bigger vision that's united. And so never do I feel like, oh, I'm able to advance my career, and this is really cool for me, and Katie sacrificing by being with the children. It's no, like, this is my role in our overall family vision. And because of that, we're able to be really united in the journey.
Yeah, I just think having that big picture is just so helpful just in a marriage.
Yeah.
Elisha and I both want like a happy, healthy marriage.
Yes.
And so if he is, letting me take a nap and he is foregoing something he could do, so he's helping me out, or, then he has a happier wife, and, or a healthier wife. Or it's the same way when I do little sacrifices for him. We aren't sacrificing so much as you see what you're saying. Again, what you're saying yes to, which is, a happy, healthy, loving spouse is going to love you better.
That's right. So it's unfortunate when people, only see in retrospect how much they value their marriage. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? But there is an element of truth to that song.
Yeah.
And we want to avoid that at all costs. It's like, no, we just do value marriage, and we don't want to let unhealthy habits or mindsets creep into our home and into our marriage and start keeping track of who's doing what, and that tit for tat, that drives a wedge over time. And we just want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah. So anyways, that's kind of we've been on both sides of the spectrum. It's obviously a lot happier and a lot more fun when we're pulling together as a team.
Yes.
Instead of, looking over at the other person and comparing notes. That's just not a fun way to live life. And I start realizing that I get more and more and more depleted when I have that, depleted in my soul, my emotions, my happiness, all those things. Because the more we try to take from our spouse, the emptier we feel.
Oh, yeah.
And when I'm feeling like, oh, I can be a joyful giver, or it's just so much more rewarding, and the relationship's so much more fun, and Elisha is so much more likely to joyfully give to me. I use myself as an example, but I feel like more often Elisha's the one who
no, that's
starts
not true.
by joyfully giving, and then I respond.
No, I don't think that's the case at all.
But anyone can start a positive cycle.
Yes, that's
in
right.
a relationship.
That's right.
And it just takes one person. So
yeah.
Anyways, hopefully this was kind of encouraging. I feel like it's kind of all over the map a little bit, but
yeah, it was. But I don't know. It just reminds me of how much I want to keep a like-minded and united vision in our home, and the power of that. So hopefully it encourages you to do the same in your home. Thanks for listening.
See you guys.
Yes. Well, next week. Next Tuesday with the Q&A. Like I said, don't miss the Q&A next week. It's going to be good. Bye-bye.